please let me know in the comments when you show up. So if you can see and hear me, please let me know. And if you showed up at the beginning, I said good morning, meant to say good evening. But please, if you can see me and hear me, please let me know. Last week we had issues and you couldn't hear me speaking. So please let me know if you can as you're showing up. And I'm just going to check online as well to see if you can actually hear me as well. And my phone, of course, is wanting to cause problems. Okay, so I think you can hear me. If anyone's here, please. Oh, hey, Grammy. Thank you for joining. Thank you for letting me know you can hear me as well. So, okay, so I think you can hear me. I'm just watching and seeing kind of how many people are popping up here, and then we'll go ahead and start on the sermon. So, just kind of giving people just a couple minutes or a couple moments. For those of you who are on, if you wouldn't mind, just kind of letting me know how you're doing, how your week's been going. I'm just going to go put a reminder on the Facebook page, just real quick. So I'm not sure if you can see me or whatnot right now, but I'm just doing something on the Facebook page just real quick. So hello, everyone. If you could just let me know how you're doing and how your week's been, that would be great. And then we're going to jump into our second sermon of this sermon series we're on, Believing Our Beliefs. My internet's going very slowly, so I am just trying to post real quick. Oh, good to see you, John Luke. I think Grandma Gwen is watching. I can see Grammy. My internet is going really slow. Really, really slow. So I posted something. I'm just going to share the video as well, and then we'll get going as long as this internet decides to start working. And it's being a pain. So that sounds about right, doesn't it? Technology doesn't work when you need it to work, and it's working fine when it's really not that big a deal for it to be working or not. So if you would just turn in your Bibles, please, to Matthew chapter 9. Not Matthew, so sorry. We're going to be in Mark chapter 9. That's where we're going to be kind of camping out this week. And I'm just going to do one more thing for us just to kind of get this out, and then we'll be going for it for this evening. And I don't plan on keeping you guys very long tonight. I'm hoping to do more of a devotional side of things this evening. So I'm just sharing this video real quick, and then we're going to be going for it. I can see that we have about 10 people on. I'm sorry you're waiting. I wish my internet was just going really fast, and then I'm going to go for it. I promise you. So Mark chapter 9 is where we're going to be. And tonight we're finishing up, as I'm just getting to this next thing. Okay, here we go. So we're starting our second week of believing our beliefs. So last week we talked about the difference between belief and believing. And so I'm coming right back to you guys. I think you can see me, but I was on Facebook. So last week we talked about the difference between beliefs and believing. So beliefs are something that is normally in our head. Normally it's something we've dedicated to our memory. It's something we can repeat. It's, when we can kind of talk about, well, as a Christian, specifically since we're talking about Christian things, we can talk about, well, as a Christian, I believe this, this, and this. That's one of my beliefs. But what we've noticed and talked about quite last week was believing is different. So we can talk about what what we claim to believe, but how we act really proves what we actually do believe. So belief is more of a talking sort of thing. Believing is how you're actually walking in life. And so we talked about that last week. And this week, I want to talk about what it looks like to believe, those things that are actually quite hard to believe, especially as Christians. There are some things that we believe that are actually just quite funky, is the word I would use. And I think sometimes we have this idea that we just have to immediately believe those things, that we can't ask questions, that if we ask questions, somehow we're failing God. And that's not the case at all whatsoever. And so we just really need to press in, trust Him, and talk about certain things. And so I just kind of want to throw some ideas out there about some things that we believe as Christians. And really kind of the whole point of this, to be quite honest, I really wanted to save this towards the end, is for us to kind of think, and as I'm saying certain things, I would actually just encourage you and kind of challenge you actually to think, do I really believe that as deeply as I could, or have I, asked some questions about these things or whatnot? So, and feel free to answer in the comments if you are up to it, or if not, that's fine. I don't want you to break any sort of, I don't want you to feel uncomfortable, that sort of stuff. But so as Christians, we believe one of the big things we believe in is, of course, Jesus. We believe that Jesus came to earth, that He is God who took on human flesh, that He was 100% God, 100% man. This is what we believe. You really can't be a Christian if you don't believe that. And more so, we believe that He lived a perfect life, that people just didn't write about His life and make it seem like He lived a perfect life, that He really did live a perfect life. And what we mean by a perfect life is He never committed sin, and sin something else. So I'm going to kind of go at these quickly because we could talk about this and it could just be me rambling about things we believe, and we're not actually going to get anywhere. There's not going to be any traction. So we're not going to do that. And as you can see, I'm standing tonight so that I can move around a bit more. I think that the ideas kind of get all jammed up whenever I'm sitting. And so I wanted to stand a bit today. So hopefully I don't move too much, but it kind of helps me get the ideas out there a bit better. So anyway, but then as we say that Jesus lived a perfect life, we're saying that in regards to the fact that He never sinned. And so as Christians, another thing we believe in is this, not just this idea of sin, but the reality of sin. And I think a lot of us, our beliefs and what we actually believe, that's whenever we find friction, or we kind of might find some issues in what we claim to believe, because we have an idea of sin. We kind of know what we're supposed to say about it, and that I'm not supposed to do some things and I'm supposed to do other things and that sort of stuff. But we don't really come to terms with the reality of it, especially and not to insult any of the youth that's watching, because I'm actually right there with you, especially for several young folks, not all of them. But a lot of times, the younger you are, the more you're not really aware of how evil and cruel and awful this world can be, and in its broken state. It's kind of hard to see that. I know there are lots of youth that they've seen it. They've seen it from a young age, and you're not oblivious. And I don't mean to be mean for anyone that might be not really oblivious, but we haven't come into this idea. And of course, I don't pray that on anyone. But we know that this world is broken and messed up, and we believe that Jesus never sinned in any way whatsoever. We believe He was tempted in ways, but temptation didn't work the same that it works for us, because we have desires to do things we shouldn't do. He didn't have those at all, so He knew how to approach those things. We believe that Jesus showed us what it meant to be truly human, that being human isn't a curse, it's a blessing. We believe that Jesus lived and He had 3 years of ministry, and that He was falsely accused. He allowed Himself to be beaten, allowed Himself to be hung on a cross, and He died a real death, not just pretending to be dead. But then this is kind of where some of our beliefs, we might come into questioning things. And I promise I'm going somewhere. But then we believe that He was dead for 3 days, but then He rose from the dead, or that He was raised to life again. We believe that. And you really, once again, if you can't really be a Christian and not believe that Jesus is alive and well today, that He rose, that He showed Himself to many people, that He ascended to heaven, and that one day He will return. These are some basic things we really have to believe to be a Christian. And I only say those things, and there's some other things I want to talk about, like Old Testament wise, that I wonder if any of us have ever questioned that. If we're like, okay, I believe, but, and some of you will hear this and know where I'm going, but I believe, but there's some things that are kind of hard to believe. And I'm not sure if we know how to approach, like, God, how do you help? Can you help me with this? There's some things that I'm not sure I do believe. There's some places I have unbelief, and Lord, I'm just curious if there's a way that you can help me here, or we're afraid to admit that to him. God, can you help me? Will you help me? What's going on there? And so I just want to encourage us. And there's some things we believe in the Old Testament that are funky. So we believe that like an army, because we do believe that this is one thing we believe that's kind of out there. We believe that the Bible is divinely inspired, that some men and women didn't just get together and they wanted to fool a bunch of people. We believe that God himself has divinely inspired men and women to write things for us to know who he is and how to be in relationship with him and how to be in relationship with one another, how to even be in relation to our own self. So that's one thing we believe. And I can almost guarantee that all of us have wondered, did some men and women just kind of put this together just to, make it seem like there's a God out there when really there's not? I wonder if we've ever questioned like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if you have. I have. I've thought those things, and we have to, constantly bring these things to the Lord as we're, challenging our beliefs and really digging in. Asking questions isn't bad. It's a way that we're digging into the soil and getting deeper into the heart of God. And so it's not a bad thing. But we believe, for instance, there's a story where an army just marches around a wall, doesn't do anything, and after 7 days, the walls crumble. We believe that happened for real. We believe that a flood covered the earth. Okay. We believe that in that flood, God saved a particular family, and there were animals that were led by pairs to that ark. And we believe that God did that. And there's many other things we could talk about in the Word, but for the sake of time, I don't want to just keep diving into those. And all of those things I'm saying, because as we dive into the Word, as we dive into church life, as we dive into the life of a Christian, the life of a disciple, there may be some times that we have questions when the world around us is kind of chaotic and things are going crazy, and maybe things are going really well, and maybe that's what kind of causes you to doubt because things are going perfectly for you. So, why is this? And so there might be all these questions that we may have. And so I just want to go to a particular story in the Gospel of Mark. Just kind of tackle this. There's a man that we're going to mention or talk about, and we're actually going to jump to the same account, so the same story, but a different account in Matthew's gospel towards the end. So in Matthew chapter 14, we see someone in Matthew chapter 9. I'm sorry, I looked at my Bible and I was in the wrong chapter, and it's Mark chapter 9. I'm all over the place tonight. I'm very sorry. So actually, you turn this fan on. It's a little hot in here, which means my Bible's going to start blowing around like crazy. So Mark chapter 9, and I'm going to start in verse 14. I'm just going to go through with us. And then I might stop here and there just to explain some things that are going on. But right before this, it's important for us to know that a very important event in the Gospels taking place. It's called the Transfiguration. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John. I'm going to give you the crash course. He takes Peter, James, and John up to the top of a mountain. As they're there, Jesus, that's great, Grammy. I'm glad to hear it. Jesus takes Peter, James, and John to the top of this mountain. Jesus is transfigured. In other words, he begins to shine really radiantly. Peter is amazed, and Peter loves to just kind of go off the fly, and he says, "Oh, we should build like tents for you, Moses and Elijah right now." And this moment is probably just a moment where like they're believing in depth, like their belief is just kind of skyrocketing. And it's not just at 100%, it might be like at 300%. This has got to be a beautiful moment. So Moses appears, Elijah appears, and Peter says, "Let's build tents for all of you." God just starts speaking. God the Father starts speaking and says, "This is my son, listen to him." And then after this happens, Moses and Elijah are gone. There's things going on there where Jesus is the fulfillment of the law, which would have been associated with Moses, and he's the greatest prophet ever. And Elijah was considered the greatest prophet until Jesus shows up, because Elijah was pointing towards the Messiah. Jesus is the Messiah, so he's better. And so all these things are happening. It's this great mountaintop moment that we could really refer to it as. And literally it is. So we look for mountaintop moments as well all the time. We actually talked about this a few weeks ago, that maybe life isn't always about the mountaintop moments, because a mountaintop is the smallest part of that mountain. And we live our whole life just waiting for that moment. And it's such a little moment. But really, it seems like a lot of the learning and a lot of the beautiful moments in life happen either when you're in the valley. I mean, even when you're climbing that mountain and it's hard, whatever it might be, it seems that there's many more beautiful moments happening when we're in the thick of reality, when we're not in those mountaintop moments. And we do believe that at one point in time and history, when actually time and history are just restored, renewed, and actually time ceases, that's going to be our mountaintop experience, and it's going to last for all eternity. Right now, the focus isn't mountaintop. It's something much different. And so immediately after this, the story we're going to be in is immediately as these four men are coming down the mountain, so Jesus, Peter, James, and John, as they come down the mountain, they're immediately thrown into the back into reality. And so this is where we're picking up our story. And it says, when they came to the disciples, so 3 of the disciples plus Jesus are gone. We still have 9 other disciples that are kind of doing their own thing down at the bottom of this mountain. And it says, and when they came to the disciples, they saw great crowds around them and scribes arguing with them. So there's crowds around them, and then there are also specifically some scribes around them as well. And scribes were experts in the written law. And immediately when they see Jesus, the crowds were greatly amazed and ran up and greeted him. Maybe he's still radiant from the transfiguration that just happened. Maybe. And he asked them, what are you arguing about with them? So his disciples. And someone from the crowd answered him, Teacher, I brought my son to you, for he has a spirit that makes him mute. And whenever it seizes him, it throws him down, and he foams and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast it out, and they were not able. And he, Jesus, answered them, O faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you? Bring him to me. And they brought the boy to him, and the spirit saw him. And when the spirit saw him, immediately it convulsed the boy, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. This is a weird story for me to read on Wednesday night, I know, bear with me. And Jesus asked his father, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. I just want to mention a couple things. Jesus, we're not done yet, but Jesus comes down from this mountain. Immediately, that's important for us to notice, the crowds see him, they're amazed, they go up to him, they say, hey, look, this is what's going on. He asks them, why are you arguing? And then this man says, I came to find you. Rather, I just found your disciples, and I've been asking them, can they get this spirit out of my son? It's just a caring father wanting to take care of his son and get this thing out of him. And Jesus, he says they were not able to do it, and they're your disciples, and they can't do this. And so Jesus, without rebuking anyone, he does say something that might kind of catch us off guard, because we're taught that Jesus says the sweetest things, the nicest things, but this is what he says. He says, "Oh, faithless generation, how long am I to be with you? How long am I to bear with you?" So he says those things, but then notice what he says. He says, bring him to me. So he says, you've been with me for so long, disciples, and you still don't get it. I've already sent you out before to do these things, and I was just gone for a little bit with Peter, James, and John, and you still don't get it. Okay, bring the boy to me. Let me show you how to do this. Let me show you what to do. So in the midst of really what seems to be an unbelief on the disciples' part, we're going to read more about that here in a minute. Really, Jesus approaches this unbelief and says, let me show you how to do this. He doesn't say, okay, well, I'm getting rid of all the 9 and I'm just going to keep the 3 that went with me to the mountain. He shows them what to do. And so I also want you to notice that whenever they bring the boy to him, so just as the crowds, when they immediately saw Jesus, they respond. Immediately when the spirit within this boy sees Jesus, it responds as well. And so immediately it convulsed the boy. He fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And then imagine the scene. So Jesus is here. The Father's over there. They're bringing the Son to Jesus. The Spirit sees Jesus and starts making the boy convulse. And Jesus doesn't immediately put his hand out and start praying for the boy. You know what he does? He starts talking to the dad. He just keeps the conversation up. Listen what it says here. It says, immediately it convulsed the boy, the spirit, and he fell on the ground and rolled about, foaming at the mouth. And Jesus just asks the Father a question. He goes, how long has this been happening to him? It's like a conversation. There's a kid on the ground. I don't want to take away from the seriousness of what's going on, but there's a kid on the ground convulsing, seizing up. And Jesus looked at this father and goes, how long has he been convulsing? How long has this actually been happening to him? He's just engaging in conversation. But I think this is because where his believing is, because he knows who he is. He knows what he's going to do. So all of this looks quite comical, at least for me, that he's just having a conversation while this boy's having a seizure. It's because he knows that he can deliver this boy. He's going to it. And it's not like he's just dangling healing in front of him and going, well, I'll do it when I want. That's not it. He's going to take care of the kid. He knows it. He's not worried about the spirit. And we'll see in a moment that he quickly gets rid of it. But there's something he wants to teach his dad in this moment. And so he asks him, how long has this been happening to him? And he said, from childhood. So the dad says, from childhood. And it has often cast him into fire and into water to destroy him. But, now this is the kicker, but if you can do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Two important things to notice there. He asks, if you can do anything. Earlier, this father called Jesus a teacher. That's pretty telling of where he thinks Jesus is. Sure, he has this belief that Jesus can heal. He's probably heard about his ministry, heard about the amazing things he's done. He wants to see if it's real. So he says, if you can do anything, help us, or have compassion on us and help us. Also notice he says us. So he's not just looking for himself to be healed. He's not just looking for his own belief, just so he can just kind of feel good about himself and, get this revelation. He really wants to take care of his son. So he really is a loving father wanting to take care of his child. But then Jesus says to him, so remember, he said, if you can do anything. He's kind of he seems like he's putting Jesus kind of up to like a test. Like, if you can do this, help us, have compassion on us. And Jesus says, if you can, and there's an exclamation point underneath that. I don't know if you're looking, but there's an exclamation point right after that. It says, if you can, and it has the Father's words in air quotes, basically. If you can. And Jesus says, all things are possible for one who believes. And notice he says, all things. All things are possible for one who believes. And Jesus is pretty, he's not really exclusive there. He's pretty inclusive. So anything and everything, all things are possible for the one who believes. Now, I always have to make sure on these sorts of things when we say all things are possible for you who believes, or if we're looking at Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, those sorts of verses. It doesn't mean that we can be fools with that. It doesn't mean that, well, I can, if I believe that I can, eat a can of Dr. Pepper rather than actually drink it, just eat it like it's freaking candy. I mean, that's not going to work. That's not the point of this. It's those things that are going to help us grow closer to the Lord, lead others to the Lord, help build the kingdom of God here on earth as it is in heaven, those sorts of things. So for you overly zealous folks, which I appreciate you, it doesn't mean we can do anything and everything we want, but it means we trust the Lord in everything. And we know that those things he's called us to do that seem quite scary and are quite scary, we trust him in those. We believe that it's possible for him to not just get us through those things, but to teach us and grow us in the midst of those things. So all things are possible for one who believes. This is how Jesus ends that. Now we have another immediately. So we had an immediately when the crowd saw Jesus, they were amazed. Immediately, the Spirit responds to Jesus, and immediately now the Father is going to respond to Jesus. And he says, immediately the father of the child cried out and said, and this is the main thing we're going to focus on tonight, I believe, help my unbelief. And when Jesus saw that a crowd came running together, he rebuked the unclean spirit, saying to it, you mute and deaf spirit, I command you, come out of him and never enter him again. And after crying out and convulsing him terribly, it came out, and the boy was like a corpse, so that most of them said he is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he had entered the house, his disciples asked him privately, why could we not cast it out? And he said to them, this kind cannot be driven out by anything but prayer. We're going to look at the end there in Matthew's account here soon. But I really want to look at that verse where the father cries out. It doesn't say he just sits there and goes, All right, I believe, but help my unbelief. Literally, he's crying out. Remember, his son is there. Like, as Jesus was having that conversation, his son is sitting or laying right next to him, convulsing, seizing up, and the Spirit is taking over him. And of course, because he loves his son, remember, he said, have compassion on us and help us. He's not just looking out for himself. He doesn't just want to have a revelation and then move on. He wants his son to be healed. And I believe in this moment, something shifts when Jesus says, all things are possible for one who believes. His father saying that his unbelief isn't just affecting him and how he's receiving Jesus. Somehow it's also affecting his son. Not that Jesus is sitting there saying, I'm not going to heal him unless you believe. That's not it. Jesus would take care of this son whom he loves. And with as much as the father loves him, Jesus loves this son even more, for sure. But I think the father realizes something here, and he says, there is belief in me. And clearly there is. He brings his son to Jesus. Maybe he's kind of testing the waters. He's trying to figure out what's really going on. But he clearly believes that there's something to this Jesus. And so he brings his son to him. But he says, help my unbelief. Help my unbelief. I believe, but Lord, help my unbelief. Look at what he says here. I believe, help my unbelief. He doesn't call him Lord there. That's important for us to know. I said that a second ago. He doesn't say that. I think that's his cry there, is he wants to know, are you this Lord? Are you the one who can deliver my son? Are you the one who can heal my son, take care of my son? I want to know this. So I believe, but yet help my unbelief. And so please turn to Matthew 17. This is where we're going to end, and we're getting close to ending. But that cry there, I think, is a cry that as Christians, we're going to cry, or we have cried. I think it's something we have to be willing to admit. I think in the church, a lot of times what we do is we believe that we have to have all the answers. I don't know where that idea came from. I feel bad for those of us who struggle with that you have to have all the answers. And I'm sorry it's been kind of a crash course to get to this point, but I don't get why we do that to ourselves. I don't get why we put this pressure on ourselves to have every single thing in life figured out. As when it comes to salvation, God never promises us that. And I think, like, why would you want to know everything? Why would we want to know everything? It puts a pressure on us that just doesn't make sense. It doesn't really track. I mean, if we really knew everything, I don't want to sound morbid here, but we would know when everyone's going to perish. We would know even when you are. And that'd be probably frightening for many of us. Or very exciting for some of us who are looking forward to what's on the other side. But I don't think that's a pressure we need to put on ourselves. I think daily we need to be willing to admit that there are things we believe and we get it. Like, maybe not, it's not that we have our hands on it. Oh, there you go. I mean, I see what you said. Good. That's good. But I believe there are things that we're learning and we're growing. There might be things that just come quite easy to believe. Like when the Lord has specifically delivered you from something, it's good to believe that in you're solid in your belief that He has delivered me from something. I know He is who He says He is. But there might be some other things you struggle with. And notice that the Lord, whenever He says, I believe, help my unbelief, Jesus doesn't say, well, since you got that little unbelief in you, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to help you at all because you have a little bit of unbelief in you, because you're operating in a world that's fallen and broken and it's affected the way that you think and act and the way that you are. You got to be perfect right now. And sure, in Matthew's gospel, He does call us to be perfect as our Heavenly Father is perfect, but He calls us to do that by trusting in Him, not by accumulating our own perfection. It doesn't work that way. We try to do that, we always fail. And so I think in our walk with Christ, as we start believing our beliefs, sometimes the way we do that is by genuinely crying out to God and saying, I believe in you. I believe you are who you say you are. But there are things that I don't really believe, that are hard to believe. Would you help me to see those things? Would you show me where there's sin in my life that's legitimately hindering me from believing the things I'm supposed to believe? The things that will be life-giving and freeing and will set my sights not just on what's happening now and how God's building His kingdom now, but what's going to come later. We must be willing to admit, Lord, there's things in my heart that need help, that I need to believe even better. They need to start living out even better. And it's reassuring to know that He's not a God who, once we ask, is going to chide us and scold us and say, how dare you? He encourages us to come to him. James chapter 1 encourages you to come to him when you lack wisdom, when you don't know what to do or where to go. You can go to him. He wants to bless you in those ways. He wants to be there with you to answer questions, even if it's an answer you don't really care to hear. Like maybe you think he's going to answer one way, he answers another. A good father is going to give you the answer you need to hear, not necessarily the answer you want to hear. Because the answer you want to hear might be temporarily or immediately kind of satisfactory, or it's going to satisfy you. But the answer that maybe sometimes you go, oh, that's not what I was expecting, later has the benefits. It has the peace, the hope that comes with it. And so in Matthew chapter 17, we have the same exact story told from Matthew's point of view. His account of this story. And it ends just a little differently. This is where I wanted us to end tonight, very quickly. The disciples come to Jesus after the spirit has been taken out of this boy. And the disciples, this is what the word says. Then the disciples came to Jesus privately and said, "Why could we not cast it out?" He said to them, "Because of your little faith." I want you to hold on to that, little faith. "For truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed," okay, so little faith, grain of mustard seed, "you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. And nothing will be impossible for you." Once again, I just want to read it again. If you have faith, because of your little faith, "For truly I say to you, if you have faith like the grain of a mustard seed, you will say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move, and nothing will be impossible for you." So here's what's up. The disciples asked Jesus, why couldn't we get that spirit out of that boy? Why couldn't we get that demon out of that boy? What was going on? And I'm sure they're defeated. I'm sure that they're upset. I'm sure that they're embarrassed because they're supposed to be representing Jesus and they couldn't do it. I wonder how many of us feel the same way when we're supposed to be representing Jesus in a certain way and our lack of belief gets in the way. And Jesus says, well, it's because of your little faith. All right, cool. I got an answer. That makes sense. I can track with that because of my little faith. So I need to get big faith. I mean, that's the way my mind works. I need to go and get big faith. I need to go and have the biggest faith anyone's ever seen. So then I'm going to move mountains. I'm going to run. I'm just going to walk on water. I'm going to sprint across it. I'm going to run from, California all the way to Australia on the water because I'm just so fast. And I'm so, and not just that, because my faith is so big. But notice how Jesus answers this. He says, it's because of your little faith. But then notice, he says, if I can find my place, he says, because of your little faith, for truly I say to you, if you have faith like a grain of mustard seed. So first he says grain. Grain by itself is very little. Grain of a mustard seed. And then in Matthew chapter 13, Jesus talks about mustard seeds, how they're the smallest of all the seeds for plants. They're the smallest. So he says, because of your little faith, but you actually need little faith in order to move mountains. Jesus, that doesn't make a lot of sense. Why would you say that? That doesn't make, I would be sitting there going, so it's because of my little faith, but I need little faith. What? And so to get away from all of the joking and to get serious, I think it's because of where you're sowing that little faith. When those disciples were attempting to cast out that demon in that child, where was their faith being sown? What were they sowing it into? Their power and their ability? Oh, well, Jesus did it this way, so if I kind of put on the same sort of show and kind of figure it out, then I can do it too. Or were they sowing it into Jesus and the kingdom that he's bringing about and the good news and in his power? It seems that the mustard seed grows just like any seed would grow when it's in good soil. And with the seed of faith, which is little, it's always little, it needs to be put in good soil. And anything else we could put it in other than God is bad. It's like putting it into, so say you're pouring concrete and you put it in there and then you let the concrete harden up. You can't do anything. You can't water it. It's not going to grow. You kill it like that. You can put it into, to steal from one of the parables, you can put it in a weed infested area. It's going to snuff it out. The weeds are going to snuff it out. You can put it into a rocky place and it might grow for a minute, but then it's really not going to have a lot of solidity and it's going to fall away. You can kind of just throw it along and hope somehow it kind of gets into the ground, but then birds are going to come and take it off and do what they will with it. But then you sow it into God. You sow that little faith into a big God, and he does anything and everything with it, as long as it glorifies him and it's for the good of his people, and it points towards the coming of the kingdom. Of course, it's not for selfish reasons. We don't ever do these things for selfish reasons. But so for anyone watching, whether you're youth or whether you're not, whoever's watching, whether it's in real time or later, I just want to encourage you in two ways. I don't know what this is. So 2 ways. For some of you, and I want to pray specifically for this. For some of you, the prayer is, I believe, help my unbelief. Jesus, I believe you are the way, the truth, and the life. I trust in you. I believe that there is hope and purpose and peace found in you, and that because of you, history has been radically changed, and what I see right now is not how things are going to be all the time. You believe that, but there are things that kind of plague you. You wake up and they're on your mind. You're at work, they're on your mind. You're doing a jog, they're on your mind. You go to sleep, they're on your mind. They don't leave you alone. And once again, we talked about this with doubting our doubts, the last sermon series we were in. But it's more than just a thought. It's literally, it's plaguing your very being. It's hurting you. It's not just an idea and you go, well, it's kind of weird. It's literally hurting you from the inside out. But I also believe there are some of you who your prayer isn't, I believe, help my unbelief. Your prayer could be something like this: I don't believe, so help my unbelief. Or I don't believe, and I don't really know if I want you to help my unbelief, because I really kind of think this is a bunch of hogwash anyways. And I want to encourage you, even if you think it's a bunch of hogwash, to give this Jesus an opportunity to talk to you, to say something to you, to blow your mind and ignite your heart. I say that as your friend, not as someone who is against you in any way, someone who actually loves you. I want you to come to know someone who truly does care for you and love you in a way that you've really desired since the moment you were born. And he wants to be there with you. And so I just want to pray for those folks. But I also want to pray, or this is more of an encouragement. I want to pray for that, but also with little faith. Faith is always little, because we realize how little we are, how incapable we are on our own. And we give that little bit of ourself, which is everything. When we give everything, it's like, I'm giving it too big. It's too big there. It's so little. But we give it to a big God. Big isn't even a good word to describe him, because big still has limits, and God doesn't. He has no limits, but he's massive compared to us. And we give that little bit to him, and then he does the massive things. He does the impossible things. He does the mind-blowing, heart-igniting things. And it's amazing. And I just want to encourage you that you don't have to have it all to trust in Christ. You don't have to know it all to know with all your heart that he truly does love and care for you. So sow that faith in him, and he will do amazing things with it. So I'm going to pray for us, particularly for those 2 things, and we'll talk about, in the prayer, we'll talk about where we're sowing our faith as well. And so thank you so much for sticking with me. Sorry it went a bit long. Sorry I had to speed through it to get to those other portions. But seriously, thank you for those of you who have stuck on for this evening, and even if you're watching in the future. Cool. So let's pray together. Lord, as always, we love you. We thank you for all you've done today. We just praise you for who you are, God. We thank you that when we're feeling our best, when we're rocking and rolling, Lord, that you're right there. And when everything around us is crumbling and we don't understand life, we don't like life, we don't know why the world is the way it is, still you're right there. And so specifically tonight, I pray for those who they believe, but they need help in their unbelief. God, I pray you would answer their prayers, that you would reveal to them the things specifically for them that are bothering them in the way that you see best to answer. There might be ways they think it's supposed to be answered, and that is the way you answer. There might be some other folks who are thinking you're going to answer in one way and you come at them in another way. But I pray they will be reminded that it's always in love and care, and because you're a good father who knows what we need. So they wouldn't think you're doing this because you're cruel or evil, because you truly do love them. And then for those who might be praying, I don't believe, and I really don't want you to help me in my unbelief, but I don't believe, but I'll give you a shot with belief, Lord. I pray that you would encounter them in ways that they've never thought possible, that there's a way that you'll captivate their heart that nothing and no one else ever has, God. And that they'll come to see you're not a God who all you do is you just hand them a to-do list and you say, do this, do that, do this, do that. And then they kind of find their way into heaven. But you're a God who pays a debt they could never repay, but then gives them a freedom they could never find on their own. But you're not a God of condemnation by any means. You're a God of restoration and of reconciliation. That life will come open to them, that they will realize they're not just some material that's happened to come together and they're just kind of here for a couple decades and then they fade away. That's not it, that there's more to them, God. And then I pray you would encourage us and lead us in the ways to sow that little seed of faith into you, God. How to sow that little bit, which is everything we have, which is still a little, into you, into our big God, our massive God, who can do anything and everything for his glory, our good, and all things to bring the kingdom on earth as it is in heaven, God. We trust you. We love you. And I pray for anyone that just needs to know you in this moment, that they will come to know you, God. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for never forsaking us. And thank you for being a good God. And it's in your name we believe. It is in your name we hope. It is in your name we trust. Amen. I love you guys very much. Thank you so much for coming. And then this is a normal thing for me. Sorry for going a little over time. And love you guys very much. Have a blessed evening.